So we are here, Rabbi YY. Thank you so much for joining me. I really
Thank you.
appreciate your time
My privilege. Thank you for the opportunity.
and your willingness to dive into some sensitive topics. This has been a little bit of time in the making. And you and I are both in a certain leadership responsibility and role where people are coming to you for guidance. As a rabbi, which has morphed into a lot of their own personal problems and struggles and challenges. Yet we, as people, each have our own growth work that we need to do. So I'd love to explore how we can navigate and how we can help mainstream the idea, which is my main goal tonight, is the idea of self-development, that it's not just for those who have gone through these major traumas, which you speak about a lot in your talks these days, but for anyone seeking a more meaningful, connected life, and maybe get a little personal if possible. And if things go well, I would love to do this again.
Beautiful. May God grace our conversation, and may we be channels for more light to come into our universe. Heaven knows how much we need it.
Yeah, we're in a time that we definitely need it, and that's definitely going to come up. But the first place I would really like to start, which I think is a good place to start, because I think we're both, I'd like to consider myself a Chabad Chassid. And I see that, as I learned, I'm a Baal Tshuva, and I've been learning about the sacred wisdom of Chassidus, and especially listening and watching, as I mentioned to you before, all your classes, trying to understand more about what the real message of the Alter Rebbe was, and, all the way down to our current Rebbe. And one of the things I saw, and this is what I've noticed, is that, there was a point where the Alter Rebbe had to make a decision where it was in the fork in the road, as you would say, where he had to decide whether he was going to go to Vilna, or he could go to Mizrich, where he was going to learn how to daven. And from my understanding and what I see, it wasn't just a choice of learning more Torah or learning how to daven. The Alter Rebbe is making a choice about where he sees that he's going to need to pave the road for the next generation and the generations to come, which I believe davening represents Avodah Shebelev, which is this idea of really working on one's heart. And I think that was the Alter Rebbe's message, especially in the first chapter of Tanya. He brings it out so nicely with discussing animal consciousness, which you talk about a lot in Yeshurim, about how the primary language of the animal is the emotions, and how really he wanted to focus that we should be working on our emotions. Unfortunately, what I've seen today is that I don't really see a clear defined path of how people are really approaching that. I see there's a talk of Moyach Shalit al Halev, but to actually go and say, like, this is the work for everyone, which I believe that book was for all of us, to strive to be a Beinoni, a better person.
So the story goes, it's a fascinating story, that the Alter Rebbe said that he can go to Vilna, and of course that was the home of the great Gaon of Vilna, was considered the Lithuanian genius of the generation, known as the Gaon. And he said, over there I'm going to learn how to learn, but he said, learning I know already a little bit. He said, a little bit I know how to learn. Davening, I don't know at all. And the Mizrich, they say you could learn how to daven. Now we have to understand what that means, of course, because Alter Rebbe says, I know how to learn a little bit, I don't know how to daven. So obviously, you're talking about learning and davening on the frequency that the Alter Rebbe experienced learning and davening. And really, I think what it really comes down to is that the Alter Rebbe felt, I guess he had an instinct, and it's very hard for us to talk about a soul like the Alter Rebbe's, who's, the magnitude of the soul and the mind is, I think, beyond what anybody could describe in words. But nonetheless, the little that we do understand and comprehend and experience, it was ultimately a comprehensive system that he wanted to create that would synthesize the davening and learning to really become integrated, and there should be like a seamless flow of learning and davening. Davening, as you said, the Gemara says in Tractate Tainus, is avodah shebelev. Avodah shebelev in English means the avodah, the service. Shebelev is, the Rabbi used to say, in the hearts or with the hearts. It's the work in the heart and with the heart. In other words, there's the work inside the heart, and there's the work in the other parts with the heart. That's davening. Learning, of course, is awareness of the God's blueprint for life. The Alter Rebbe's entire purpose, or much of his purpose, was to create an integration between the two. That the learning becomes a davening, and the davening becomes a learning. And what that means in practical terms, I think, is that whatever we learn doesn't just remain up there intellectually, analytically. We analyze it, which is nice, but it becomes a davening, becomes avodah shebelev, becomes an energetic, visceral experience that is embodied. Right, the two big words of the Alter Rebbe from the Medrash Adira B'Tachtonim, that Hashem wanted to be embodied, literally, v'shechanti b'soichem, right, in our temple, in my heart, my nervous system, my soul, my psyche, my brain, and my pinky. So that's the davening, embodying a learning. And the davening also becomes a learning, which means that one's emotions and one's internal life become aligned with the frequency of the divine. That integration is what makes his teachings, and more than his teachings, living with his teachings, so magical. Because, to say it frankly, there's many people that are doing work, emotional work, and it's magnificent. There's many people that are learning, and it's also magnificent. But what often happens is when I do emotional work, I can also get stuck. I can get paralyzed. I know with my own experience, my pain becomes my story, and my story becomes my pain, and it's for good reason. This is not to judge anybody, really. We're all work in progress, and we're all trying, as you said, to become better people. But very often, I can get stuck, I can get paralyzed, and it's tricky because I'm into emotional healing, and you develop a vocabulary of emotional healing, so it camouflages as very progressive and enlightening, but I could stay stuck in my own orbit of judgment towards myself, judgment towards others, and ultimately being a victim. So that's where the learning is so powerful, because it gives you a template of God's vision for you, which is always a vision of infinite greatness. On the other hand, I could be learning all day, living in my head and my brain, and even with brilliance, but it's simply not embodied, and my emotional life remains very underdeveloped. So that incredible synthesis, literally in every aspect of Yiddishkeit, that Alter Rebbe embodied in every one of his teachings and discourses and Tanya and Shulchan Aruch and whatever he touched, is, I find in our generation, to be oxygen. At least I could speak for myself and for what I try to teach my students.
So for sure, and if this really was the mission of the Alter Rebbe, if we could say, like, at that moment where he decided to go to Mizrich, that he placed an emphasis on, let's call it heart work, connecting with Hashem through our emotions, refining the animal consciousness.
Yeah.
I see so many Jewish communities hesitant to embrace the deep emotional development. And what do you think we still have? Like, why do you think people still have this hesitancy? Like, what barriers are coming up for people, preventing them from doing deeper self-work?
I know where I was. I tried to be non-judgmental because I get it. It's a painful process. It's facing difficult challenges. And if I have created coping mechanisms that allow me not only to survive, but to be productive and to be a good person and to be a good Jew and to serve God in an earnest way, so I can understand tremendous resistance, number one. Number two, sometimes people who are not so familiar intimately with this work, because maybe they didn't go through the process so much, for whatever reason, maybe they didn't feel the need, their children didn't take them down that path, they never had a major struggle or a breakdown in their life. They sometimes could look at it and say, oh, it seems selfish. People get narcissistic and self-centered, and it's all about what I'm feeling, what I'm not feeling. And part of being a Jew is you're a soldier, you're a servant of Hashem. Wake up in the morning, do what Hashem wants. And they'll even quote lines of Tanya, like Mayach Shalat al Alev, you mentioned before, right? The brain rules the heart with an iron fist. So get over your stupid emotions and don't be a crybaby. And we all have problems. And the previous generations had much more problems than you, but they forged ahead, boots on the ground. They put one foot ahead of another foot. Now, all these sentiments, I'm saying it a little bit with humor. I understand it. And not only that, for many generations, this has helped people survive. And this has even helped people survive in very graceful and dignified ways. So I think we have to be very sensitive to that and understand that, real inner emotional work is very, very difficult. It's painful. It's challenging. And it's important to know a very deep truth in life. We don't know what we don't know. Right? We don't know what we don't know. We really don't know what we don't know. And this is not a knowledge that's in the brain. It's not computer knowledge. This is not AI. This is not artificial intelligence. This is very, very deep inner work of working through emotions. But I think you and I know very well, and probably anybody listening or watching knows very well, when you're sitting in the presence of somebody who's involved in this work, you just feel it and know it. It's a different language. There's a different energy that comes from their face. There's a different energy that's going into you. Carl Jung, who once said, we will only change people to the effect, we will only change people to the point that we're ready to change ourselves. And it just radiates. Teachers, mentors, parents, leaders, rabbis, rebbes, mashpiyim, educators, principals, therapists, gurus, life coaches, whatever it is. Leaders of all stripes and types, those who are truly, truly challenging themselves every day, challenging their ego, their insecurities, their wounds, their survival mechanisms, their coping mechanisms, their instinctive triggers and responses to life, their anger, their jealousy, their fears, and they're really working with it. When they teach Chassidus, it's alive. It's alive. It's not words. It's alive. You suddenly see Tchias HaMesim in people. You see the resurrection of the dead. I know this with myself. I could teach sometimes. It's painful for me to say, but there were times in my life, I was detached from my teachings. I gave a good class, I think, but it was detached emotionally. And I'm not saying, the messages are sometimes very helpful and people get out of it and it's a good thing, it's spreading good things, but I completely cannot compare it to when I'm a channel. In other words, when, my ego gets out of the way, at least as much as I can do at that moment, and the energy comes through in a more transparent fashion, the way it affects people is completely different. It's not anymore with guilt and shame and negativity. There's like a godliness, like a divine energy that gets awoken in them. And it's never about me or really about anybody else. It's really about the frequency of divine energy, that we are all privileged to be a channel. And the more we get ourselves out of the way in a very healthy way, we become a channel, the more the more infinity we channel through us. So, but listen, I think every person ultimately needs to discover it from within.
So that leads to a good layup question, because I heard you say it a couple times now, is do you think that people need to go through something in order to make these messages of Hasidus or, personal development real? Like, do I need to face a certain meitzar or a gvul or a certain brokenness or a challenge that is
powerful
humbling?
Question. Very, very powerful question. Very powerful question. So here is the truth, and here is how we apply the truth. The truth is, we are all facing the greatest abandonment wound that anybody can imagine. It's called the soul coming into the body. As the Alter Rebbe puts it in hundreds of discourses, and he wasn't saying this as poetic fiction, but as literally energetic reality. The consciousness of every Jew is literally infinity. It's pure infinite oneness and bliss. That rupture that departure in our own perception, where the soul is thrown off a cliff, what he calls me'igre ramalabira mikta, from the sublimest of mountains, of divine, majestic heights, into a dark abyss, and suddenly, boom, the animal soul takes over and says, okay, you got to survive, but you know what? I'll take care of you. I'll take care of you. How do we turn you into a celebrity? How do we turn you into a powerful person? How do we turn you into a respectful guy? How do we turn you into a tzaddik, into a lovable guy? Whatever your animal soul, the trajectory it takes by figuring out your strengths. And by the way, the animal soul is brilliant and clever. And right away, it's adjusted. It creates all the neural pathways and all the neurons in a most, you got to give this animal soul credit because it is brilliant. Talk about PhDs. When you're 1 week old, it already figured out a pathway for life, and you just play it out. And then you're 40 years old, 30 years old, 50 years old, and we're just coping. And the animal soul makes adjustments every second of the day so that nobody catches you and you don't even catch yourself. And I may live my entire life not knowing that I'm simply coping and surviving and running away from all the things that I don't even know how to face. So we are all dealing with this, no matter what family or circumstances you grew up with. However, and I said this the other day in the class, and I was very emotional when I said it. I said, all those of you who experienced those curveballs that really, really derailed the course of your life and has given you tremendous, tremendous angst and created crises in your life. And I don't say this without empathy. I say this with a lot of love and empathy. But at some moment, you're going to be so thankful because it's those traumas that you experienced that woke you up to the true trauma that we are all dealing with. And it's called, in Hasidus, it's called the first symptom, which means basically the perception of being abandoned, of being in an empty space devoid of God. And specifically, it's my soul, your soul, our soul, coming into a body and an animal consciousness in a completely new reality where it has to rediscover its relationship with Hashem completely within and from a place of tremendous choice and creativity and courage, dealing with so many distractions that are not its fault. Like, wow. And when we become aware of this emotionally and energetically, and we realize the greatness that we have every moment to make a choice in which world we're going to live. Am I going to live what Alter Rebbe calls in the klipa reality, where basically I'm living in shells and husks and cover-ups and blockages? And that means every conversation with my wife, with my children, with myself, with my friends, with my students, with my constituents. It means when I'm sitting on the couch, and when I'm making money, when I'm in shul, and when I'm serving God, but I'm living in these shells and husks. There's a lack of true authenticity. And I also have a choice to live in the frequency of oneness. Like, wow, how powerful, how powerful. When you start feeling these things energetically, it's a different life.
So
life is transformed.
So that's of course, and I 100% am in alignment with what you're saying. And I think what you're talking about is the macrocosmic level of we have that abandonment wound, but on a microcosmic level, when I experience something like that resembles that wound, we re-experience the wound that was originally experienced. We have to go through that where we feel the original trauma leads to the trauma playing itself out because we eventually have to work on it. Do I have to go through something to feel that original abandonment wound, to feel that original soul coming down into the body and feeling that angst or that why am I here?
Why?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I ask every day. So I'm not in a position to answer that question. And the reason is because it's Hashem, the creator of the universe, who designs the path of every individual that their soul needs to become the person that they're supposed to become. So what any person needs, I cannot answer that question. I could just speak from personal experience and so many people I've dealt with and had encounters with. And that is that the micro traumas that play themselves out in our life, the massive ones, the huge ones, rape, molestation, horrible abuse, physical, emotional, sexual, whatever, dysfunctional families, abandonment through caregivers, even emotional neglect, which may not seem very dramatic, but it's very dramatic inside the heart, right? So when I say massive trauma, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a headline in the newspaper, but it's a headline in my own brain. It could be a headline, right? Or traumas that are not even noticeable to the child. The child may say, I had a perfect life, I had a perfect upbringing, amazing, but they suffered stuff. And as a result of that, they shut down. So I think all of us know that there was probably nobody that, if we dig a little deeper, has not experienced some rupture in the attachment that they needed, some wound. So it's obviously that this is designed. It's not like this random mutation that one person's mother or father didn't know how to be parents. Like, everybody at some point is experiencing a wound, some people in much more dramatic and vivid ways. But let's face it, you're in Costco with your mother as a baby, right? And she goes down to another arm, and you woke up, and for 3 minutes, your mother was not there. Nobody even knows what that baby experienced in those 3 minutes. Nothing happened. This is an unbelievable mother, an amazing mother. This is purely designed from heaven. So I think, ultimately every single person goes through things in life that, if we're going to open ourselves up to it, probably, I would say most of us will have to face deeper wounds. And I think the ultimate healing and purpose of that is to really bring us back to the ultimate purpose, which is surrendering all of our need to be separate and our fear around that to the place where we're never abandoned. Exactly how every person reaches that, I'm not in a position to answer that. I can't.
And I will say that I've been a follower for a long time of your works. I've, even started from the Tale of Two Souls. Like, I was listening to it on cassette tapes. And, I've been very early on, maybe 19 years ago, I started listening to your stuff. And I noticed that there was a certain point where the message became more relevant, I would say. And it's interesting what you said. You said, a person has to be willing to acknowledge, which I believe that's where all first steps of really working on my emotions come from, is I have to open up my heart. Well, I have to.
It's called vulnerability in English.
and so there's a point that I've noticed in what you're saying, that your message sort of got more visceral, more real, more authentic, more vulnerable, more about the trauma. So there's two questions to this. Number one is that not the world at large doesn't necessarily align to the way you describe Hasidus. In fact, some people oppose it. I've noticed. I've talked to people about it. Like, I'll say things based on what I've heard from you, which I completely align to, and it feels right to me. And then they'll come out and say it's sort of changing the message, which is one thing. And then I want to go into a little bit, when did that shift for you? Like, what happened for you in your life that you felt that there's the message is speaking to me? It's not just a book, it's not just a concept.
Yeah. Excellent question, and very profound and meaningful and relevant. And I could probably talk about this for a couple of months, but I'll just say I see some key points, and that is, I always craved this from day one. When I learned Hasidus, and I had the tremendous privilege of growing up at the feet of the Rebbe, of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and in his final years, I had the merit of being one of the oral scribes, known as the Chayzerim, who would memorize the Rebbe's talks on Shabbos and holidays, because there were no recording devices and no AI. And we had to memorize it. We got to memorize it and transcribe it. So I really grew up in a very, I would say, in a very tight grip of Chabad Hasidus, in terms of education and, intense education, and learning the text and the works and being immersed in it like in a mikveh for many, many years. And I consider it the great privilege of my life. And I always craved I knew I knew that it's all about personal relevance. I just felt it in my bones. And there were also people who shared that with me, that it's always about how personal it is. The Rebbe once said in a talk, he would say this often, but once he gave it was almost like a scream, a shout from emotion, a talk. And he said, and that is why the Rabbeim, our teachers, demanded, he said in Yiddish, as jeder inyan chassidus muz haben abechein, that any idea you touch in chassidus must be translated into a visceral expression, it must be translated practically. What does this mean in my life? How does this touch me? You could learn about Adam Kadmon and Toyu and Tikkun and Kav and Rishimu and Tzimtzum and Iris and Kalim and Spheres and Akudim, Brudim, Atik, Arich, Keser, Malchus. Great, amazing. And if you have a good teacher and you have a good mind and you're spiritually oriented, it's incredible. And everybody said, but what's the Bechein? How does this affect me? So I always had a craving for this. Unfortunately, we didn't have so many teachers who taught this to us. And not because they didn't want to, they were good people, but they didn't have the tools. Most of the teachers, they just didn't have the tools. They would teach their information and it remained detached. I knew something was missing. I knew it. I felt it in my bones, but I didn't know how to. I didn't have those mentors and teachers for the most part to give me those tools. But I was immersed in it and I taught it. And I had to go through my own journey, including my own emotional struggles as I got married and started to raise a family and started to experience, what it means to be immersed in a marriage and a relationship with children. And as my children grow up and I experienced various struggles in my own personal life and my own emotional life growing up, it really challenged me to go into a deeper place. And with the help of some very special people along the path, first and foremost, my soulmate, my wife, who God blessed me with, and some other very, very special people in my life, I got to uncover deeper spaces inside of my own heart. And I have to say, it's literally work in progress. It's every day. This is avodas every single day. It's not something we do 20 years ago or 10 years ago, 5 years ago, or even yesterday. It doesn't work that way. It's oxygen, A relationship with Hashem is moment. It's right now, as we speak. The Baal Shem Tov says the world is created literally right now. So this work is constant and constant. And then suddenly I realized, wow, every authentic emotional truth I was touching and was touching me in the deepest place, I saw it. It was in the Likutei Torah. And I was one day I opened up a mimer and I started to learn it. I learned the mimer and I started to sob. Suddenly the words were dancing on the page. They weren't printed on the page. They were dancing. I took the words. I was sobbing. I kissed it. I started to kiss it. And I started to thank the Alter Rebbe. And suddenly I learned this my whole life. But suddenly these were living words. This was energy. He was literally channeling the frequency of cosmic oneness, of redemption, of Mashiach, of healing, of transformation, of what everyone is desperate for, what everyone is searching for, what everybody's dying for. And even those who are running away from it and opposing it are dying for it even more. They're dying for it even more. They're even more desperate for it. And who's not yearning for an authentic life? Who's not yearning for an authentic relationship with their spouses, with their children? There's so much suffering. There's so much anxiety. There's so much pain. There's so many so many families with children who feel so alienated from everything that they were taught. All the Hasidus or the Halacha or the Shulchan Aruch or the Gemara, whatever, different communities, everyone in their own way, but so much alienation. Like, is there one person who's not seeking a deeper relationship? And I feel even so much part of the resistance, it's just really, it's working for me. And this is just new stuff. And it's going to drive us all crazy. And it's going to maybe get us for the deep end. Whatever, sometimes a lot of fear and a lot of naivete and a lot of ignorance. And sometimes there's judgment. And sometimes there's, as I told you, people don't know what they don't know. And sometimes I've learned this in my own life. our deepest, deepest traumas, we repress and suppress for eternity. And whenever anybody goes there, our brilliant psyches have developed a very sophisticated mechanism of saying, this is heresy, this is a war on God, this is against the Baal Shem Tov, this is against the Alter Rebbe. And I'm not even judging. Like, I really get it. I get it because I do it in my stuff. When things challenge me, what do you think? It's easy for me just to surrender and say, yeah, I was just afraid. No, I'm not afraid. So, we're all, once we learn about the animal soul, basically, one of the most beautiful ideas of Tanya is, don't be ashamed that you have an animal soul. Get rid of that shame, because that was exactly what God wanted from you. The fact that you have an animal soul is not shameful. In fact, it's exactly what you need, right? Once you know that, you could look at the animal soul and say, oh, okay, my dear animal. So this is what you want now? I get it. Without shame. And then you know what happens? You don't have to go down the rabbit hole. It's like, yeah, of course, my animal soul has these coping mechanisms, and it gets insane. It gets crazy. It literally gets crazy. I'll tell you something. It's interesting. I didn't expect this because I do a lot of Zooms, I do a lot of conversations, I do a lot of shiurim, as you know, but it was so interesting. Around 2 or 3 minutes before this conversation started, I was standing near my bookcase here, and suddenly I felt this anxiety. And I felt like I started to shut down. And I'm like, this conversation is going nowhere. I don't want to have this. It's going to be boring. It's going to be dead. It's I don't know. I was just like, there was a part of me that was shutting down and was judging it. And basically, if I would have gone that direction, the person talking to you now would be a shell of a person. I may still say words because I know the word. I know the words. I can open the filing cabinet and take out the file and preach. But in terms of energy, you would have the shell of a person. What Alter Rebbe calls klipa, literally a shell of a person. I was grateful to Hashem and my soul, which is a part of Hashem, that I noticed it. And you know what I did? I didn't judge it. I just surrendered. I'm like, wow, you're so scared. You're so scared of something. I don't know what you're scared of, but you're so scared. And then I said 2 chapters of Tehillim. Chapter 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Even when I go down the valley of the shadow of death, I don't have to be afraid. That was to comfort my animal soul. And then since I knew that this is going to be a discussion about Chassidus, or a big part will be about Chassidus, I said also the chapter Tehillim of the Rebbe's Kapitel, which is also a very beautiful chapter of Tehillim this year. I lift up my eyes to you like a servant completely surrendering to the master. And I didn't argue with it. I just surrendered to the fact that, there's so much fear. There's so much fear. And I literally breathed into it. I felt it in my body. I didn't argue with it because it's not an argument. It's an animal soul that's afraid. I don't even know what exactly it was afraid of. You don't look so scary. But whatever, it probably had its stories. I don't know, whatever. It got triggered. I'm not even judging it. It's like a little puppy. It's a little puppy that gets very scared. Just give it a little hug. Breathe into it. Take its pain seriously, but don't take it so seriously to the extent that you have to change your entire life and become a shell of a person. I embraced it. And I'm like, now let me hear what my soul has to say. And my soul is, of course, you want to be authentic. Who doesn't want to be like, you don't want to be authentic? You want to be a shell? And boom. So that's what happened just a few minutes ago.
So I appreciate you sharing that. And I'll say I had my anxieties of coming up to this meeting as well. And throughout the last week, I would say, because I know it's coming. And whenever I know something's coming, that I don't know how it's going to go.
Yeah. Listen, the animal consciousness, remember, has ways it figures out the world. And it's constantly responding to keep itself safe. It could be you wrote to me before that you want me to ask you questions. So maybe my animal soul had resistance to that, like who's interviewing whom. Could be that was one part of it. And probably some other parts. It's important to a certain degree to understand a little bit your mechanism, my mechanism, our mechanism. But ultimately, and I think this is one of the great ideas of Tanya, and this one of my mentors showed this to me, that the Alter Rebbe never gets obsessed with what the story of your animal soul is. Because that's not ultimately, huh? Yeah. I learned this from somebody, because somebody asked me when they started to teach Tanya learn Tanya, they said, like, it looks like isn't he bypassing? He's just like animal soul, klipa, 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 klipa. This person was molested. This person was neglected. This person was thrown off a cliff. This person was bullied, right? This person is an orphan. This person experienced a crazy divorce. This person's mother is narcissistic. This person's father is whatever. Like, the Tanya doesn't go there. Okay? It's true, psychology was not developed in the early 1700s. That's true. But the Alter Rebbe's blueprint for life is unique in history. The Alter Rebbe says, I'm giving you all the answers for all the questions. And I think one of the profoundest answers to this is, and I think it's true, is the Alter Rebbe says, I can describe to you 1.1 billion stories. Right? But I want to tell you the core of all of them. The core of all of them is, you think you're not infinite. That's it. The core of all your stories is, you think that you and Hashem are two separate things. And you need to create a substitute for God. We call it Avodah Zarah. And Avodah Zarah does not mean worshiping a statue, because you don't worship statues, and I'm not interested in worshiping statues. I'll tell you what Avodah Zarah does mean. Avodah Zarah does mean allowing myself to become synonymous with my anxiety, with my jealousy, with my fear, with my insecurity, with my hatred. All these emotions become substitutes for reality. Reality is, you're a channel of infinity. You're not abandoned. I'm not abandoned. Does my animal soul feel it? No, that's why it's struggling. So that's why the stories are important to a certain degree, because they give us validation, they give us clarity, they give us perspective. But really the bottom line is, our stories change every 5 minutes. It may have been a text that you wrote. It may have been something else. It may have been a combination of 20 things and subconscious stuff that I don't even know about. And the bottom line is, we choose in a very empathetic way where we're going to spend our days and nights and relationships, without repressing and without denying and without the need to feel shame that we have crazy coping mechanisms, because we all do. Unless you're a tzaddik, and you may be a tzaddik, I'm not there yet, and then you don't have coping mechanisms. Your animal soul and your divine soul are fully aligned, and then gewaldic, and that's a tzaddik. It's amazing.
So I think actually what you're describing is great, but I think that's to the people listening, I think it's really important to understand. I mean, even in your latest mimer that you gave over, you said the vart of the Magid, which says the shtei chatzais, right? So where I have to work through all the tzimtzumin to come back to see that I'm really connected. It's not really two pieces, one piece. So what would it actually look like? What does it actually mean, in your opinion, to work through my emotions or my stuckness, or my tzimtzumim, or my meitzarim, or my anxieties?
You're asking a very heavy question. I don't, to be honest with you, I don't feel I'm in a position, both of knowledge and experience, to say one absolute answer that's applicable to all people in all situations. This is such a personal and intimate path, and people have to go through so many different journeys to be able to find their soul. So I need to be extremely respectful of that for myself and for others. But on a general level, I would just say as follows, and that is, what the Maggid is teaching is an incredible teaching. This is a teaching of the Maggid of Mizrich that's quoted in Basi Lagani, Tovshin Chafei 5725, 1965, a mimer that we recently learned before Yud Shvat. And this teaching of the Maggid is so incredible because what he's basically saying is that all the tzimtzumim, all the concealments and restrictions of God were not in order to hold back, they were to create unity. To create unity, you need to give space for the other person. I cannot connect to you if I overwhelm you, or if I dominate you, or if you're swallowed up in me. So the Ein Sof, infinity, literally condenses itself and filters its light and limits its light and withdraws its light and conceals its light. And on one level, it seems like it's God's absence. So the Maggid is saying, no, it's because he wants a relationship. He wants a relationship with you. You need to own the relationship. For you to own the relationship, it has to come from you. If it's coming from you, it means you have to work through your blockages and own the relationship and say, this is who I am. So every single one of us, not only should we not fear our blockages, that's exactly our journey towards oneness, towards the relationship. Now, what exactly does that look like? So I think that's a spectrum. That's literally, it's a spectrum that is so big. What does that look like?
So I'm curious, as someone who's speaking about it and talking about it in all of your teachings, is what is the actual process for us Jewish men to work through our stuff? And I know the spectrum is big, but there are the common struggles that we have. And, today we can see there's marital struggles, there's marital
Great
breakdowns.
question.
There's people that are numbing themselves. There's people that are stuck or confused. There's people that have...
The first thing I would say is we all need great support systems. Surround yourself with people who you trust, who you love, who will be real with you. People who will challenge you, but challenge you because they like you, they appreciate you, respect you. I saw a line somewhere, when you start respecting yourself, you stop spending time with those who don't. Your life is too precious to spend time with people who don't really respect you. We all need support systems, whether it's in our, of course, if you're lucky enough to have a spouse, it's amazing, but close friends, therapists, rabbis, mentors, coaches, etc., whatever that looks like for you, males with males, females with females, etc. Sometimes it's family, sometimes it's outside of family. You can do it with family, sometimes you could do it with family. Sometimes you have a brother who's amazing, and sometimes a brother-in-law, and sometimes an uncle, and sometimes not. You got to go to others. But we all need a real support system. Support system is people with whom you are brutally honest and vulnerable. You can share everything. You can share, you can be open, you can be real, you can cry, you can laugh. You could talk about what happened last night. You could talk about what you were feeling when you came home. You could literally share. We need to be able to share the fact that we're living, behind glass walls, everybody with bulletproof vests and, smiling at bar mitzvahs, and it's fake news is very, very torturous. I think that's first and foremost. We must have those people in our lives. The Rebbe would always say, "Aseh lecha rav," "Knei lecha chaver." The Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos, right? We must have mentors and we must have friends.
You got to pay. You got to pay for the friends.
Exactly.
That's like today. The lashon is even stronger.
Knei lecha, buy it.
Yeah, you got to acquire it.
I was once a therapist, and there was a very intense conversation, and the therapist said, "Do you trust me?" I'm like, "No, I'm paying you. I'm paying you. How can I trust you? You're not doing this voluntarily. You're not doing this because you like me." And the therapist responded and said, "It's true, you're paying me, but I care. It's true, you're paying me, but I care." So, but every person in their life, we must have, are there people in your life, 1, 2, 3, with whom, everything is open. You're real. It's just you're vulnerable. You're naked emotionally. Of course. That's number one. Without that, I'm just living in my own bubble and concocting my relationships from within my own imagination and, manipulating the world, even if it's with good intentions. The second thing I think that we desperately need is we have to find, God has gifted our generation with a tremendous amount of healing modalities. It's not a mistake. It didn't happen randomly. Everything is by divine providence. The enormous amounts of healing modalities that have been developed over the last few decades are incredible. find that which will help you.
And on the flip side, because everything's Lumas, we have just as much ability to numb, distract, and check out. So the fight.
Of course, this little toy could keep me numb 24/7. Literally, I'm in the elevator. Instead of, I can get socially awkward. I'm more shy than people think. So I'm in the elevator. Instead of looking around, regulated, and saying, hi, such a nice weather today. What brings you to this hotel? What do? I take out my phone, and I start reading an email. And I even feel like I'm God's gift to humanity because I'm answering emails in the elevator. Like, look how productive I am. I'm not like a schlepper wasting time. I'm just running away from my social anxiety. Whatever it is, it's so subtle. So I think we could know ourselves so easy, but there's amazing, amazing healing modalities today. And I think everybody who's searching for this type of enhancement of life, quality of life, and healing, should really, really pursue it. And this brings me to something else, and I know this in my personal life, is learning Chassidus and davening, but not learning intellectually. Learning Chassidus and davening emotionally, energetically, together with internal work, I find to be life-changing. Because Chassidus literally holds up a blueprint of who you are, who you were, who you will always be. And even if I fall into the abyss and I make mistakes, it's always like that place where you just come back home, come back home. I once had a very deep emotional experience where I was dealing with my own struggles of disassociation, which I struggled with for many years in my life, emotional disassociation and numbness, and like a split between my outer self and my inner self, one of my struggles, and which created a lot of anxiety as well. And I was struggling, what is the mechanism to get back? Like once you're cut, like you're cut off from yourself. I didn't know how to get back. It's almost like when somebody cuts off a part of you, like, how do you get it back? How do you reattach those pieces? And again, one of my mentors who I did a lot of work with said something very, very special to me. It fell into my head today because this was a while ago and I started to cry when I remembered it. They said, this person said, you know what you need to do. You know what you need to do. You need to open up a Likkutei Torah from the Alter Rebbe, quietly, silently, start learning the mimer, go into the energy, open yourself up to it. At some point, you'll experience it. You've been there. You know what it is. You know the frequency. And the person said, and once you're there, you're going to look at yourself and you're going to say, my full name is Yosef Yitzchak. So the people who know me well call me that. So this YY is Yosef Yitzchak. And then you'll look at the Torah, you look at yourself, and you say, welcome home, Yosef Yitzchak. And it's so true for each and every one of us. Like, we all need, what is the mechanism that will help you welcome yourself back home? Like, bring you back into coherence. Maybe I was manipulative. Maybe I was exploitative. Maybe I was trying to charm somebody. Maybe I was trying to, whatever it is, to show off, to be the celebrity, whatever, every person in their own way, my coping mechanism. I got it. Maybe I got angry, maybe my kids, maybe this pressure, financial, emotional, psychological, spiritual, blah, 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 blah. I'm angry at God. I'm angry at the world. I'm angry at Biden. I'm angry at Netanyahu. I'm angry at everybody. I'm angry at myself, etc. Life is miserable. Okay, my phone doesn't work. I lost the keys to my car, etc. And I'm starving and I have the flu. I got it. So I lose myself, right? We all need a mechanism. What is the mechanism that when you go there, it's like you could say, welcome home.
And that's beautiful, and I think that's amazing. But I actually don't think everyone has that. I don't think everyone has the ability to say welcome home. And what I've found, and this is actually,
what do you do?
This is very interesting. So one of the reasons I got into the work myself, or working on myself, is because I was faced with a big Meitzar in my life. is I went against all odds and I married a woman with kids, and a lot of people told me not to. And I put myself in a situation where I was this 25-year-old kid, and I was like, yeah, I can handle this. And my wife's previous husband passed away. And deep down, what I didn't even realize, what only, because I think at times, eventually what we can do is we can become aware of what the reason that we get into situations. Like it becomes revealed to us later as we do work. I was a guy that grew up and I was number two in my family. I wasn't number one. I had an older brother. He was the perfect child, so to speak, and my father gave him all the attention. I wanted that attention, so I was number two. Where did I find myself in my life? Because we're always repeating the same patterns, is I was the number two husband. And because I didn't accept being the number two, my father has this famous story. He says that when I was a kid, we were going on ATV four-wheeler rides, and it was oldest to youngest. So I hid my brother's shoes so I would get to go first. As a 3-year-old kid, I was wanting that attention and, living from that place of wanting to be number one. So I attracted that in my life, and it forced me into some really deep work on myself where I could actually successfully acknowledge and embrace through the work that I had to face that I'm okay being number two. I'm not your first husband. These kids, these two kids that you came with, they aren't my biological kids. Yeah, I'm going to take them in, but you had a husband before, and here's the proof of it. And I had to do some work to find that. Now, I was just learning something interesting recently. He gives this idea, and he says that there are 3 levels, and you were talking about anxiety. There's 3 levels of fear that are really mentioned. Maybe there's more, but the 3 levels that he discusses are there's this idea of yira. And what's the idea of yira? In its source, yira is the idea of really having awe for something, like seeing how something is in its greatness, and I'm in awe. Like people would tell me when they go to the Rebbe, they just had this awe, like they wanted to hide behind a pole. They didn't want to be in front of the Rebbe, because as Yira comes closer, you feel it more. So it's rooted in like this deep awareness of something greater than me is in front of me. It's like really meeting God, and that's why it says Reishis Chachma Yiras Hashem. But then you go to another level where you say there's this something called pachad, which is fear of danger, and fear of this tangible harm. It's something that immediately is a recognizable threat, and it's actually normal. You describe it as the animal, telling you when you have to go to the bathroom, or not running in the street, and doing something dangerous. But then there's something called ema, which is this panic or terror, most closely related to this idea of this all-consuming and paralyzing thing called anxiety. And it's often irrational. But where we see the beginning of the first place in Torah where ema is mentioned is when, by the Bris Bein HaBesarim, and Avram has this, it says there was an ema, and there was this great darkness.
Yeah.
And he saw what was coming. And I think what was being said over there is that what the Jews were going to go down into and experience this Mitzrayim consciousness is they're going to develop anxiety. And so there's this anxiety, and it lives in us. And you could see this because when you look at the story of the Jews leaving Mitzrayim, and you say this a lot, you say the Jew left Mitzrayim, but the Mitzrayim never left the Jew. So they're by the Yam Suf, and we see it in Parshas B'Shalach, and we're sitting there, and they're right in front of the Yam Suf, and no one knows what to do. Like, you just saw the miracles. Like, what are you doing over here? And there's this guy, this is the Shaliach from Rostov, was talking about this. He said, there's a guy named Gershon ben Aminadov. And you heard about him? And everyone's like, no, I didn't hear about him. Well, he wanted to cross the sea, but he's like, what about my family? What about this? And he's going back and forth.
Nachshon ben Aminadov.
I know.
Oh.
Because the idea is, it's just a fake story, is nobody remembers Gershon, because Nachshon was the one that stepped in. So based on that, I had a mentor that taught me this method, which I think is very effective, is we have to be able to acknowledge this, and I think you can relate to this as well, because I listened to your story about how you were 5 years old and that was your first public speaking, and also the story with the Rebbe where the Rebbe said, "Tell me a story." And, I was listening to that, I was hearing what you're saying, is this idea of before I face anything, I'm always going to have that anxiety of something that's the unknown, because the unknown is alma discussio. It's the water I'm meeting. I don't know what's going to be. I don't know where this is going to go. I don't know what's going to happen. Sometimes you say it's meeting the subconscious, which people are afraid of. And the first step that I need, which are these 3 C's, the first C is I need to have courage. In order for people to make any change in life, you need to have a sense of courage, because Nachshon wasn't just stepping into the water. He was changing the paradigm of the world. He was saying, don't be afraid to go into those unknown waters. I know you have anxiety, but you could still move forward with your anxiety. You can go up to the nose. And you got to have courage in life. And eventually, if you have courage, it's going to lead to, if you do it enough times. But, by the way, you can't just have courage and say, I'm going to try this and mess up and keep on getting bad results. You got to work on yourself in the process. Like for a public speaker, you can't just go and say a speech and not get feedback and become a better speaker. You got to get better at it. So it takes hours, it takes time, and eventually you develop the second C, which is called competency, or I become competent at something, where all of a sudden I know how to do this. I've gone through these depths where people, they start working on themselves. The first thing is they're afraid to go and to do that work, and then they have the courage as the first step, and then you start doing, you become better at it, you become more competent, and eventually that leads to confidence. Because once I'm competent at something, I'm confident that I can just walk into a room, and like you were saying that story with Rabbi Steinsaltz, he says you're going to have the filing cabinet and you're going to go to an event and you're just going to be able to say whatever it is because it's all there. You don't even need to prepare for it.
Yeah.
You develop a certain confidence. But the fourth C that people don't really talk about, and this is where really everything is summed up, is community. And community is, you look at the message of what was after the Kriyas Yom Suf was Vayichan Yisrael Neged Ahar. They came together. They came as a community. And what happened? The biggest breakthrough that ever existed in the world. I don't want to plug it in here, but it's Anochi. It's God broke through to the other side because he saw that his people were together.
Courage, competence, confidence, community.
Yeah, and community's the hidden one because that speeds up the process. When people have anxiety, what they're worried about is really they don't trust the process. So they're trying to, figure out how I can get back my safety or not be in an unsafe situation. So I need to have safety on the other side of it. Community speeds up that process because when I have people that are like-minded individuals that are doing work and breaking through and talking about this work and promoting and mainstreaming it, it's like, okay, we can finally make those breakthroughs much quicker because they made a pretty big breakthrough to have that Vayichan Yisrael Neged Ahar. It's like they really need it. And you were saying in your women's shir, and you plugged in Anochi a lot last week, where you were talking about that, what's Anochi? He spoke their language. He spoke their language.
An Egyptian pronoun. Anochi, it says in Medrash, it's an Egyptian pronoun.
Egyptian pronoun. Yeah. But here's the other part.
He spoke their language, right?
Here's the other part. What's Anochi? What does Anochi mean even? Like, what is it's not a name because it's I. It means I. It's not attached to a name. It's the essence. And where you meet the essence of who you are is when you go into your own Mitzrayim, where you go into your own real struggles, because that's where you can really let God in. God doesn't want you all sorted out. The only way you can have an open heart is when you crack it open, when you're broken. You can't have an open heart when you feel like you're sorted in life. And everyone has that work. Everyone needs to meet their most essential.
Rabbi writes in Torah in Parshas Tetzaveh That a broken heart means you create a crack so that all the light comes shining in. You know, it says in Tehillim, Leiv Nishbar. So we translate it as a broken heart. And sometimes people get the wrong message. It's like break your heart. It's open your heart. It's sometimes brokenness that opens our hearts, but it's not about breaking a person's heart.
Yeah, exactly. You
Huh?
don't go around breaking yourself on purpose.
Rabbi, I would say sometimes people think it's like, you know, if you have a whole heart, it's like something, you know, negative. Of course you want a whole heart, but the broken heart means that the heart is open. It's expansive. It's vulnerable. It's a receptive. It's receptive to energy. It's not protecting itself.
And I think it's a constant thing. Like, you know, like I was saying, you know, at the beginning when I started doing work on myself, that was the narrative. Today, it's managing a life of 10 children, which I just had my 10th child.
Mazel tov. Wow.
And not only that, I named this child after my late mother, who I was waiting for a long time, 6 years, to be able to, you know, feel that sense of something is not filling a void, but something's causing me to move forward in my journey. I can finally move forward where I see
Your
like
10th child is a daughter.
Yeah.
And what did you name her?
So my late mother's name was Kalche Carmela, and we named her Chava Kalche Carmela. We're still figuring out what to call her, but
So it's Chava Bas Adam. Chava, the daughter of Adam.
there you go. Well, my mother was like the mother, the divine mother. Like she was so good as a mother. So Aim
Kol Chai.
Kol Chai.
The
So
mother
she
of
was
all life, the mother of all flesh.
she was definitely that mother. So that's my challenge now is balance. Is today I have to find balance between work, and there's an anxiety around that, and balance between my bank account, and balance between, you know, being able to go out there and help people. But we're constantly dealing with anxieties that we have to be aware of, because we're hitting a Meitzar that ultimately, as you say, if we're a channel for infinity, in order to become infinity, we have to grow, because we have to reveal more of ourselves. If we're stuck in a certain I'm sorted, then we're limiting the ability to be a channel of infinity.
One line you said, which is, I think, life-changing. And the Rebbe said this in a talk. On my talk last week about Anochi was based on that talk of the Rebbe. That the Anochi of Hashem and the Anochi of the person, which is one, the core quintessence, you will find only in Mitzrayim. Only in going into Mitzrayim and extricating yourself, that's where you'll find your Anochi. If you want to remain in paradise, you want to remain in the consciousness of purity and oneness, it's amazing. And that's where we all come from. But that's not where you find your Anochi. So here is where Chassidus not only validates the struggle, and not only doesn't demonize the struggle or doesn't make you feel ashamed and embarrassed and stupid and nerdy and you're the only loser, you know, in Toronto or in Muncie or wherever you are, but it's the other way around. It's like, this wasn't a mistake. Like, yes, the soul comes from unbelievable consciousness, but the Anochi, which is higher than consciousness, because it's the I which is beyond consciousness, because consciousness is also a definition. It's an experience, consciousness. So the real Anochi you're going to find, Asher Tzisichem Eretz Mitzrayim. Going into the boundaries, the confinements, as you said, the mates are the distressful places that we're afraid of. And that's where you find your Anochi. And I think anybody doing this work, you touch this. As much as we want to protect ourselves and our children from darkness, I think I know this about myself, and you'll tell me about yourself if it's true. You know, and I asked my class the other day, a few last week, and I think most could concur. And that is, it was our darkest moments that put us in touch with our deepest essence. Even if while the darkness was happening, we did not know it. But dealing and confronting those darkest moments showed us that that's where you touch your essence. And it's a very painful thing to say, because it could sound like almost, you're justifying pain, but God forbid, nobody justifies pain. It's God's plan. It's not our plan. but it's so true. It's so true. I want to say something because I heard somebody talk about it. I heard a woman talk about this.
I'll just say I agree with you, because you said, if I 100% I
There
agree
was a
with
woman
that.
who said something that I just feel it was so painful to hear. She struggled a lot. I mean, frankly, she was raped as a kid for years by a respected guy in the community, whatever. And she desperately needed help, desperately. And she was told by people who represent or supposed to represent Judaism that she should just follow the path that she's on, not seek any healing, outside of that inner circle that she's on. Just do the right thing, do God's will, learn Torah, observe mitzvahs, get married, raise a beautiful family with simcha, and everything is going to work out. And when she said, I'm desperate, I'm dying inside, I'm struggling. And they said, all the answers are in Torah. Just continue to learn Torah. And I just want to say something about that, because it takes a very profound and abstract, beautiful idea and distorts it and can abuse people. It says that Torah is the blueprint of the universe. Hashem looked into the Torah and created the universe. That means there's nothing in the world that doesn't exist in Torah, because everything is in the blueprint. Everything in the house is in the blueprint. And there's nothing in the blueprint that doesn't have ramifications in the real world. It's all one. It's all connected. And that's so true, and it's authentic. And the more we learn Torah and the more we work on ourselves, the more we see that. But to tell somebody who's struggling emotionally that all the answers exist in Torah, but you're not giving them the tools. You're not making them feel better. You're not helping their marriage. You're not calming their anxiety. All you're doing is reinforcing their guilt and shame by telling them the fact that you don't see it in Torah means you are the problem. So not only are you not helping them, your words are actually causing them more damage, even if your intentions are good. Because I'm not saying, I'm sure this person's intentions were good. But people have to realize, if you are not aware and you're not understanding what people are going through, so you could say, I don't know. Speak to somebody else. I don't know. I have to research this more. But to just tell people who are really suffering, we have all the answers, just do what I'm doing, and everything will be solved. And they tried it. They tried it for years, and they're suffering. It's just, there's something very, very off about that. You have to have skin in the game. Like, if you want to be a spiritual leader, no problem. But take responsibility for your words. And if somebody is suffering terribly, don't just throw them under the bus and make them feel more guilty by just preaching to them what you have been told and not really showing up for them. So I'm saying this because for all those who are struggling for answers and this, you mentioned confidence, right? You need the confidence, you need the courage, the competence, the confidence. And you also need to be able to have the courage and the confidence to know that you have a right and an obligation to heal. You don't have to remain stuck for the rest of your life. Now, it's not an easy process, and it doesn't happen like this. It's true. But it's your right. You're God's child. You were destined to be royal. Kol Yisrael b'nei Melachim. You're a prince. In Zayir it says you're a king. You're not just a prince. You're the king himself. You're chelek elokam al mamash. People live lives of quiet desperation. And many people remain extremely, extremely mediocre, and they just live that life of desperation. But you owe your soul more, and you could demand it of yourself, and the people around you should respect that. Not because you're selfish, but because this is your path to selflessness. Because the deepest selflessness comes with that other C, which is creativity. When we reflect our Creator, and we become selfless conduits through our ultimate creativity. I'm just saying, I think this is a very, very important point, because a lot of people, suffer. They don't want to be defiant. They're not rebellious. You have the rebellious ones among us. If the rabbi tells them one thing, they do exactly the opposite. Fine. They were born to be defiant. The therapists like to say they have defiant disorder, whatever it's called. But you have those of us who are tzaddikim, who are good people. They just want to follow the path, and then they're made to feel guilty, and that's just not fair, and it shouldn't be that way.
Yeah, listen, and yeah, I think you've said this a bunch recently, is you can only take someone as far as you've gone.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that person is speaking from their understanding. We don't see the world the way it is. We see the world the way we are.
For sure.
When someone says it's all in the Torah, it's like they don't know another path. They haven't explored, and they don't even know the pain that you're going through, nor do they even want to go into trying to understand it because it's too much for them. So we need good leadership. And that's another thing, is like, how could we really push this out there that people can really feel that working on yourself is mainstream? How can we get the message out there to more people to start exploring? Because I think in what I'm seeing, and maybe you'll tell me, and I would like to know your opinion, in the next 5 to 10 years, like, what do you see as the biggest challenge for the next generation? Because generations are happening much faster these days, by the way. Every 5 years, the world is drastically changing, and we are constantly having to look at new, different types of challenges.
Yeah, I'll tell you. Anyone, if we're talking about the world of the Hasidim and Hasidus, it's hard to deny that there's not a single discourse of the Alter Rebbe, and not a single discourse of the Mittler Rebbe, Tzemach Tzedek, Rebbe Marash, Rebbe Rashab, Rebbe Riyadz Rebbe, and not a single chapter in Tanya that in some form or fashion speaks about our power and ability to be able to develop a deep, emotional, intimate relationship with ourself, with Hashem, and with others. The word Chabad, Chasma Bina Das, as I heard many times from Rabbi Khan, is a cover-up for the truth. The Alter Rebbe wasn't about intellectualism. He was about the idea that the emotions should be so powerful and so wholesome and so developed and so mature because they were processed through Chachma Bina Das. They're not just impulsive, instinctive, feel-good emotions. You heard a good song or a good story and you had a good clip from Rabbi YY and you're inspired for 7.5 minutes until the next cheese Danish or until the next depressing clip. It's emotions that grew from Chachma Bina Das, from your subconscious to your kayachma, to your curiosity, to your ability to comprehend, and Das, which is self-awareness and personal integration and being in a regulated parasympathetic nervous system, so that your emotions are alive and full and developed. But it's all about, like you said, now, to deny this, there's not a single maim in Torah, Torah, which is the basis of all Hasidus, Chabad Hasidus. It's all about energetic experience emotionally of Avos Hashem, Yiras Hashem, Avos Yisrael, Avos HaTorah, Avodah Shebelev, in the way that your physical heart expands. Your physical heart experiences the oneness. It's called bliss. It's called Tainug, Ava B'Tanugim. Of course, there's so many different levels. And we also can't deny the truth that we have not given this to our students. I went through the whole system. I don't remember one teacher who said, boys, close your eyes, relax. What does love of Hashem feel like in your heart? What does love feel like? And if a teacher would have done this, you know what would have happened, yeah? We would have diagnosed him as a Meshuggah. Even though he would just be doing what the Maimer says. His Bainanus, integration, feel it, Klois HaNefesh, Ava Kirish Ve'esh, Ava B'Tanugim, Mizeh Yavei La'ava. Who was he talking to? Oh, the old generations. They. Us? Robots, zombies. Just keep it in the brain. Just behead yourself. Separate the head from the body like Esav. Boom, you're good to go. Do the right thing. Have your head in the right thing. Your heart doesn't exist. You know what? It's not working for anybody. There's so much anxiety. There's so much disassociation. Give me real Judaism. Then the Rebbe comes along and says, we're living in the time of Geula. The whole Chassidus says, what's Geula? The experience of God in the most visceral, real way. V'nigla kvoid Hashem v'ro chalbasa yachta. Dira v'tachtoinim. Atzmos lives in my body. The Rebbe used to quote the Rebbe Maharash that when Mashiach comes, the soul will get its nurture from the body. The body will be so aligned with divine energy, the neshama is going to become a student of the body. Ad kedei kach. So that's Gula. And the Rebbe says, living with Gula. This is it. This is it. If these are not the techniques, the approach, the hashkafa, the Weltanschauung that we're breathing, radiating, teaching, we're missing out on the moment, on the experience, and we're missing out on a whole generation, an entire generation that's going offline. And how are they going offline? By going online this way. Instead of going online to the frequency of the divine, they're going online to the frequency of YouTube. YouTube is connecting them.
As long as they're listening to YY Shirim.
Okay, so if they're YouTube on Rabbi YY Jacobson's channel, we'll forgive them. But so this is extremely important. I'm not judging anybody. I also struggle with this. We don't know the techniques. Many of us don't know techniques.
But okay, we do have the latest and the greatest healing modalities.
I have a share in the morning. Yeah, we started a Purim Maimer. Yeah, okay.
I know. I listened to it this morning.
Oh, amazing Maimer. Wow. Tanya, Tikkun. Incredible.
Beautiful stuff.
Incredible. Why the soul needs the animal soul. We need the animal soul.
We need the animal soul. And you know what?
Animal soul has the sparks of Tayu.
I really want to know what are we that are going to be listening to this, because a lot of people, we're into working on ourselves. What do we need to know for the next generation?
It's called Baal Shem Tov, Alter Rebbe, Moshe Rabbeinu, God, Avram Avinu, Rabbi Akiva. It's not New Age. This is called Judaism.
We're taking.
What does that mean? I once heard from the Rabbi. He said as follows: why is it that when your well springs will be spread, Mashiach will come? It's a reward, like quid per quo. You do something for me, I'll do something for you. So the Rebbe said, no, that is Mashiach. That is Mashiach. That's the frequency of redemption. When Hasidus consciousness saturates your nervous system, my nervous system, the world's nervous system, and even President Trump's nervous system, we're good. We're good to go. You're good. That's redemption. So that is what Geula looks like. That is literally what Geula looks like. Energetically experiencing the Baal Shem Tov's teachings. Ein oid milvada. This is no joke. And I believe that the entire youth is searching for this. I speak to a lot of young people. And I see the moment I go into this frequency, they're all in. ADD, we're all diagnosed. ADD, ADHD, SHMEDD, attention deficit, hey donuts, PDD, dyslexia, all the good diagnoses that we have today for 90% of our kids, or 70%, 80%. You talk this language for real? They're in, they're all there. Oh, wow, I like this God. I like this God, I like this Rabbi, I like this Judaism. Stop selling me a Judaism of Golos. Stop selling me a Judaism of trauma. Stop selling me a Judaism of guilt and shame, of doing this because of this, and doing this for this, because you're going to get a shidduch, and God is going to reward you, and God is going to punish you, and it's not nice, and it's a chilul Hashem, and you're going to go to Gehenna, and you're not going to go to Gehenna, and you have to give this one nachas and that one nachas, and you're disappointing the community. Come on.
I think kids, what they need more from us, especially for the next generation, is you're saying you're speaking the language of emotions, is because you've started the process at some point of diving into working on yourself and working on your emotions to be able to, what kids really need to be okay, in my opinion, and what we're doing a disservice today, is they need to learn from us. They need emotional resilience. They need to learn how we can face things and overcome them and handle them. I think it's the work of Askafi and even his Hapcha to some extent, when we can transform. We used to be angry people, and now we're no longer angry people. Like, we work through our anger.
When you give a child safety and attachment, that they feel secure and safe and seen and soothed, that's the most powerful recipe, I think, for emotional resilience, because emotional resilience comes from emotional regulation, not from bypassing your nervous system, but but by regulating your nervous system. If not, you just become an angry meshugana, chaotic person. And I think emotional regulation comes from internalizing safety and teaching children how to deal with their emotions, with their contradictions, with their paradoxes, with their ups and downs, without shaming themselves, without guilting themselves. Literally teaching them about their souls and their animal souls is so precious. I was talking to a principal in a yeshiva. He's been a principal for 25 years. He's a good guy. And you know what happened over these 25 years? He also reinvented himself, as good principals should do every few months and every few years. And good rabbis should do, and good therapists should do, and good husbands and wives should do, right? We reinvent ourselves. So.
And everyone.
And everybody, including ourselves. So I asked the principal, what was the difference between 25 years ago and now? And he says, 25 years ago, the boys used to come to learn information. They wanted to learn. He says, today, nobody comes to your yeshiva to learn anything because they have more information accessible to them 5 inches away from their bed, more than you'll teach them in 15 years in this institution. And most of them know a lot of things better than their teachers. And even if they don't, in a few minutes, they could find out. And that's not what they come for, unless you have a really brilliant teacher who can teach them ways of thinking. And he says, those are very rare. So I said, so what do they come for? He says, they come for safety. They come for emotional safety and regulation and to find out who they are and to love themselves. And he says, if I'm not giving that to them, I am completely betraying them. Now, this doesn't mean our schools shouldn't give information, but it means that the basis of all the information is connection, safety, attachment, belonging. God and the system are not here to get me. On the contrary, to really be able to feel celebrated on every level of existence.
Yeah, listen, okay. And I want to respect your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I want to say like this.
Yeah.
I hope that people can tune in and listen to this discussion. I hope that people benefit from this. It's my wish. And, one thing that I've realized is that when people come to an experience, let's say a workshop, which we've been running, we're about to run our 75th workshop, and we've had 1,800 men come through it. It's a powerful experience, but not everyone's ready for a workshop, and not everyone's ready to spend that kind of money to go to a workshop. And what I want to do, and I was speaking to my partner Nachman, and we were talking about this idea that what we want to do is I want to actually go out and give people a mini course just so they can get acquainted with the work, where we take our most practical tool that people can use to practice and help work through triggers. It's a very practical tool. I believe you know of it. And the second thing is that after they go through that course, if they wanted to book some time with us, just to have some time, we're going to make our calendars open just to be able to have people reach out to us, almost like a hotline. Hey, you want to talk about what's going on? You want a path? If we can direct you somewhere, we're going to open ourselves up for that.
We need so many resources of people who are providing, safe healing work.
So we're making ourselves available for that, and we're also and we've already got some engagements. We're going on a road show this year where we're going to go to any Jewish institution that wants to hear what we have to say, create an evening event. It's totally free. It's on us. We're going to even find our way there. We just want to educate the world right now. And part of this initiative that we're talking right now is because, I think as people in the field that really believe so much into mental health and we see what the world needs, because we're hearing, from very intimate details, people are coming to us and talking to us and opening up, is that we need to collaborate and spread the message as much as possible.
Exactly.
There we go.
The real Ma'anei Secha is aligning the divine soul with the animal soul. That's what all healing is. When healing is divorced from the essence of Yiddishkeit, we lose the essence of Yiddishkeit, and we also lose the essence of healing. And we have seen both. We have seen people whose healing was not about aligning their souls. And there's something lacking. There's something tragic about that, even though they meant well. And we've seen people whose Yiddishkeit is also not about aligning their souls.
My friend has this famous line. there's healers and there's reelers. Today, there's a big distinction because healers, they're going to make you feel good. You're going to go to them. They're going to have a good experience, a nice trip and whatever, feel good afterwards. But a reeler is someone who goes home and integrates it and could sit down with his wife and have a cup of tea and enjoy the presence of his kids and play Lego and so on and so forth. So it's really about taking it at home. It's really about giving our family and our loved ones what they really deserve, becoming better versions of ourselves, and that's what we're trying to do for the next generation.
It's all about presence. The greatest spiritual masters in our tradition, you know where you saw it? You saw it in how present they were to everything they did, to every person they met, and to every experience that they were involved in. There was never, in an hour I become alive. In an hour I'm going to get excited. Now I'm just talking to some boring guy, like, let's get this over with. Now I'm just playing Monopoly with my kid, like, I'm just, whatever. I just have to be home, and that's disassociation from life. That's klipa energy. That's survival mechanism. I'm just trying to survive. I'm not alive. If I'm alive, I'm aligned. If I'm aligned, I'm in tuned. If I'm in tuned, I'm a channel. And if I'm a channel, everything is happening right now. It's like God is flowing the infinite energy through you right now. We're running like, duh. It's right here, right now. If it's through a cup of coffee, that may be alignment. In all your ways. The Rebbe once said an amazing thing. The pasuk says in Mishlei, in all your ways you should know him. So he said, Da'ehu is from the word das, which means know him, but it also means va'adam yada es chava, adam nu chava, which means intimacy. So in all your ways, you can experience intimacy with Hashem. So that means if I'm playing Monopoly with my child, or Jenga, or chess, or whatever it is, or I'm having a cup of tea with my wife, if there is a mindset, a consciousness of oneness, of connection, of presence, of vulnerability, of being in a relationship because you want to really connect, that is the Eyu with Hashem. That's intimacy with Hashem.
And the first step is going to be always, if I can't do that, then there's always going to be something for me to look at and ask myself, well, why? That's the first step of all work, and that's the first step of heading in that direction. So
yeah, and there's a lot of anxiety. I know sometimes I'll do something that I think is necessary for my child, and there's a thought in my brain, you're wasting your time. This is unproductive. This is not what you should be doing. It's terrible anxiety, and it's literally anxiety that takes one away, takes me away, takes anybody away from presence. And it sometimes uses religious arguments like, bittul Torah, you should be learning, you should be whatever, teaching, learning, preparing, doing something productive. What are you doing this for? And it's literally the anxiety of always trying to control things, staying small, staying narrow, staying in control, rather than being open, vulnerable, present, not knowing what's going to happen the next minute, and surrendering to what your mission is right now with the tools that you have according to your understanding, what God wants from you right now. And that's it's literally a much better way to live. It's much more expensive, and it's vulnerable. It's giving up control because we never know what happens the next moment. I would tell everybody, your wife walks into the room, your husband walks into the room, the animal soul tightens up. Get ready, especially if it's an argumentative couple. Like, get ready. She's going to attack, you're going to attack. Like, just get ready. We start bracing ourselves. The divine soul is like, I don't know, just be open, like, be vulnerable. There's no expectations. I don't have to control anything. I don't know what's going to happen. Like you said, I don't know where the conversation is going to go. It's like, just be present, like, just feel the other person, be spontaneous, and without guilt and without shame. And that's what it looks like. That's what life looks like. And, I know I struggle with this. I'm talking about this with excitement because I struggle with this. This takes work. It takes work to let go. The hardest work. The hardest work is simply to let go of the work and just be. The hardest work without opinions and judgments and so on and so forth. Like after a conversation like this, like in a previous reincarnation of mine, I would regurgitate things. That's what the animal soul loves doing. It loves regurgitating. It even thinks it's a kosher way of living because kosher animals regurgitate. But it's true. It's a kosher animal, but it's an animal.
Yeah, exactly.
Animals regurgitate. I once had a mentor said, you finished the speech, done. Done. It's over. Everybody heard what God wanted them to hear. You want to learn a lesson for the future? No problem. Learn a lesson for the future. But if you're going back and regurgitating, check that out, because that anxiety is something else. It's not about objective self-work. It's about shame. The Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya chapter 26, one of the most beautiful ideas. He says, you're feeling guilty? Make an appointment with the guilt. An appointment. Thursday night, 9:30, we're going to spend 20 minutes with the guilt. No problem. But before 9:30, don't show up. After 9:50, bye. The guilt doesn't like that. The guilt wants to sit there 24/7. Make an appointment. You have something productive to say? 9:30, I'm going to listen to you. Tell me everything I said that was ridiculous, and I'm going to learn how to do it better next time. 9:50, bye-bye. 20-minute Zoom, we're done. The Alter Rebbe's advice. But the guilt doesn't like that, because it's not about that. It's about crushing you. It's about destroying you. It's about telling you you're a failure. So that's what we have to learn. Where are we going to live, Which world are we going to live in? Take care, my dear. God bless you. Hatzlacha in your sacred work of Anochi, helping people find their Anochi and find God's Anochi in Mitzrayim as we go out of Mitzrayim.
And you as well, and keep on doing what you're doing. I'll just end with, I was davening on Shabbos, and I was thinking about our upcoming meeting that we're going to have, and I was during Musaf, I just burst out. I was thinking about you during Musaf. Why Musaf, Yosef, who knows? And I felt like just this overwhelming gratitude of the amazing Maimarim and the classes that you give over that have literally transformed my life. And I just bursted out crying, and I was so grateful. I'm grateful to be in your presence and for you to give me the space and to talk and to have this conversation. And hopefully people will be impacted by it. And that's my...
Thank you. That means the world to me. And I'm grateful that I have the privilege of being a channel for the wisdom of the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe and all the Rabbeim and the Rebbe through Chassidus, because it's, what should I say? Ashreinu matayv chalkeinu umanoyim garaleinu mayafu yerushaseinu. That we could be channels for this. I wanted to say wisdom, but it's not just wisdom. It's for the ultimate.
The sacred mission.
It's for the ultimate truth of everything. The ultimate truth for which we're all here.